Hello, welcome to a Neurophysiology tutorial presented by the SHLTB with reference Colora's Physiology by Agamemnon Despopoulos and Stefan Silbernack. Before we start with central nervous system physiology, we need to visualize a brief introductory phase toward a central nervous system anatomy. The central nervous system can be briefly said to be constituting of the brain and the spinal cord. And to the peripheral nervous system of each of the constituent of the brain will be the cranial nerves, and of the spinal cord will be the spinal nerves. Now, upon seeing the horizontal section of the spinal cord, we are going to have this, which is the gray matter, and this, which is the white matter. The gray matter consists of the posterior horn, the lateral horn, and the anterior horn with an isthmus here. And the white matter instead consists of columns. The gray matter consists of horn, the white matter consists of columns. Here will be the anterior column, the lateral column, and the posterior column. And now this fissure here is going to be the anterior spinal fissure, and this small fissure here is going to have the posterior fissure. So this is a general view of the horizontal section of spinal cord. So now let's see the cerebrospinal free spaces of the brain. The cerebrospinal free spaces of the brain, we need to know that inside the brain we don't have interstitial fluid. The fluid which is present inside the brain is the cerebrospinal fluid. Now, normally we know that interstitial fluid is produced in the body when you have the arterial blood vessels. Arterial blood vessels have very high pressure, hydrostatic pressure. So as the heart pumps blood and it passes through the arterial vessels, what happens is that this high pressure is going to push the fluid through the arterial wall into the tissues, and this fluid that is going to be produced is going to be called the interstitial fluid. The remaining fluid of the blood, that is with the blood with the proteins and the red blood cells, with the white blood cells, they are going to enter into the venous system, and they are going to have a reduced pressure. So now interstitial fluid is produced now in the different tissues of the body. But inside the brain, the form of interstitial fluid which is present there is not interstitial fluid but cerebrospinal fluid. And the cerebrospinal fluid is produced by the choroid plexus. We have the choroid plexus at each of the ventricles. So the main choroid plexus will be located at the third ventricle. So here is the position of the third ventricle. The third ventricle is just close to the thalamus. At this position, here is the corpus callosum here, and here is the third ventricle close to the thalamus. Now we need to know that anytime fluid is produced, it has to be drained back. The question is, as the interstitial fluid is produced from the arterial and the venous drainage, what drains it back now into the arterial and the venous drainage, such that there should not be an edema or an accumulation of fluid? So what drains the fluid of the body back into the arterial system is going to be the lymphatic drainage. So the lymphatic drainage is going to take back the interstitial fluid and then move on the right side from the right side of the body and drains the right arm with the right side of the head and neck. That main vessel that's going to drain it there is going to be the right lymphatic duct, while which is draining the rest of the body will be the thoracic duct. All of them drain at the internal, at the junction between the internal jugular vein and the subclavian vein. So they are going to find their presence back into the venous system. Now, in case of the cerebrospinal fluid, what happens is that cerebrospinal fluid is produced by the choroid plexus in the first, second, and third ventricle. So the main one which is producing it is the third ventricle. What happens is that the first thing is going to occur is that the first ventricle and the second ventricle, they are mainly seen when you have a view as such, a sagittal view. So the first ventricle and the second ventricle are going to produce fluid. They are going to pass through the foramen of Monro into the third ventricle, and then into the foramen. After the foramen of one row, they're going to pass now into another foramen, that's the aqueduct of Sylvius. After the aqueduct of Sylvius, they're going to present now itself into the fourth ventricle, and after inside the fourth ventricle, they are going to pass now into the aperture of Loschka, now into the external cerebrospinal space. This is the external cerebrospinal space, which line above which line above the brain to protect the brain from any damage. And there's another space here which is can enter and find itself now into the central canal of the spinal cord. If you realize very well, the spinal cord is going to have a central canal just in the middle here. It's going to have a central canal. You have the central canal of the spinal cord, and that canal is going to is due to an aperture which is present between the fourth ventricle and the spinal cord, and that aperture is going to be called the aperture of Magendie. So now there is a small mnemonics which you can use in order to memorize all these apertures. So the first one, if you want to notice mnemonics, you need to know a slightly bit of French. So the mnemonic is mon savant magicien lit. Mon savant magicien lit. Mon savant magicien lit. Mon savant magicien lit. So mon is corresponding to foramen of Monroe. Magicien corresponds to the aperture of Magendie. So we have mon savant magicien lit. So at this second position here, connecting the third ventricle and the fourth ventricle, we have the aperture of Magendie. Mon savant. The next one, we have the aqueduct of Sylvius, and the last one is aperture of Loschka. So here you are going to have the aqueduct of Sylvius, and here you are going to have the aperture of Loschka. So after having those, we need to pass to the next section, which is the brain cross-sectional section. If you have the brain, let's say that you have the brain first with the sagittal section as such. This is the frontal section of the brain. So let's say this is the sagittal section of the brain. With the sagittal section, you can see the central sulcus, the precentral gyrus, the postcentral gyrus, and now after that you have this sulcus above the cingulate gyrus. It's going to be called the cingulate sulcus. Here you're going to have the corpus callosum. Below it, here you're normally going to have the fornix, and in the middle between the corpus callosum and the fornix is going to be the septum pellucidum, as you're going to see in the neuroanatomy tutorial which has already been done. Here is going to be the hypophysis or the pituitary gland. At this portion here, you have the thalamus. Below the thalamus, you have the hypothalamus, and connecting the hypothalamus and the pituitary, you have the pituitary hypophyseal axis, or you can also call them the infundibulum or the pituitary stall. At this portion, you're going to have the mesencephalon, which is the midbrain. The midbrain consists of two main parts, the superior and inferior part. Superior part has superior colliculus with the superior cerebral crus, and inferior you have the inferior colliculus and the inferior cerebral crus. Now here you're also going to have the pons and the medulla with the cerebellum here. So now let's come and visualize the different areas of the cortex. We need to know that the different areas of the cortex can be classified 1, 2, 3 to 47 by the Brodmann's area, by the Brodmann area of the cortex. So at this portion you have 1, 2, 3, 4 is here, 5 is coming back here, 6 is here. So we are going to name each of them. Here we are going to have the primary somatic sensory cortex. So the postcentral gyrus, the one which controls the primary somatic sensory part. So the information of sensation of the body are going to are going to move at this area here for it to be analyzed and interpreted to be the different locations of the body. So you have the primary sensory somatic sensory cortex here, or the postcentral gyrus. You have the central sulcus. In front of the central sulcus, you have the precentral gyrus, and at the position of the precentral gyrus, you have the primary motor cortex. And in front of the precentral gyrus, you also have another gyrus, another cortex, which is going to be the supplementary motor cortex. In front of the supplementary motor cortex, you have the premotor cortex. And here in front of the premotor cortex, now you have the frontal visual cortex, the prefrontal associative cortex, and the different one. The prefrontal associative cortex, the cortex is a portion which is used in the integration and the processing of information. We observe the fourth order neurons. So the fourth order neurons are used now in the integration of an information. Let us say that we know that we are going to see below how information is going to be processed, and how information is going to be quantified. Such, because heat in the body cannot be transmitted as heat, they are going to be transmitted as impulses. Also, some are going to be transmitted as electric impulses, but now inside the brain they are going to be analyzed as both heat and impulses due to the mechanism of processing that we're going to see below. At this portion here, we have the Broca's speech area, and here posteriorly the Broca's speech area is found in the frontal lobe, while the Wernicke's area is found in the temporal lobe. So the Wernicke's area is the one which is used in the integration of hearing. So when you are hearing, it is the Wernicke speech area. But when you want to speak, to articulate for the speech, then you are moving to the Broca's area. The Broca's area is the one involved there. So it is area 44, while the Wernicke's area is area 42. Here we have the orbitofrontal cortex. Orbitofrontal cortex is the part which is involved now with the part which is involved with the integration of smell. After the orbitofrontal cortex, you have the lateral sulcus here. And after the lateral sulcus, you have the limbic associative cortex. The limbic associative cortex is the part which is used in the processing of emotions. You need to know that the limbic system is involved with emotions, and we have different parts in the limbic system. We have the parahippocampal gyrus, we have the hippocampal gyrus, we have the medullary body, the mammillary body, the amygdaloid body. All these are found inside the limbic system in order for you to have an integration of emotions. We have the higher auditory cortex, we have the primary auditory cortex here. The primary auditory cortex can send information to the Wernicke area. Both of them are working coherently for you to interpret a sound which comes from the vestibulocochlear nerve, on the cochlear portion of the vestibulocochlear nerve. So here you are going to have normally the temporal lobe is divided into a superior, a medial, and an inferior part of the temporal lobe. These are different gyrus which are here. So now at this portion here, and also at this small portion of the frontal lobe, we have this portion here, this part here, and this part here. This part here is going to be called the pars orbicularis, and it's going to contain the orbitofrontal cortex, and this part is going to be called the pars triangularis. It's going to contain the Brodmann's area 45 and 47, the last two Brodmann area, and you have this part, the Broca's area is at the level of the pars opercularis. Because it is called an opercularis because you are capable of pushing this portion of the gyrus up, and below it you are going to visualize the insula, and the insula is involved for the integration of the taste. So now we have the Wernicke's area, we have the parietal lobe here, the temporal, the occipital associative cortex, in order for you to have an accession, and you have the primary visual cortex, which is taking information from the optic nerve. So now let's visualize the next one. So now this is the reception, the perception, the transmission of information. Now the question is, when you have a heat source which is on your body, let us say that I touch a heat source, and the second thing is that I am hearing sound. So the question is, how can the body perceive the heat and the sound at the level of the brain to be different? So this is what you are going to involve in all these diagrams. So at first you're going to have reception. The reception, when you touch a source, what happens is that it is going to be converted. You have a reception. The reception can arrive with a very great number of information. The bits that you see here are the numbers of informations. So the memory of an information is what we call the bits. So let's say a high amount of bit is going to enter, that is 10 raised to the power 9 bits per second. That is what is going to enter as an information. So the heat which comes from the skin is usually larger than the heat which is interpreted from the skin. So what happened is that you have this large amount of reception you can receive from the eye, from the skin, from the different sense organ. The five main sense organs that you have number one, the smell, you have vision, you have hearing, you have touch, and you have glutation. Glutation is taste. So these are the different main senses, and you can add another sense as one of the other senses, which is not usually considered as the sense of balance. So these are the different senses that you can have. Now the next one, you have consciousness. You see that at the level of the consciousness, you are only conscious of 10 raised to the power 1 to 10 raised to the power 2 beats per second. So 10 raised to the power 9 beats per second enter, but you are only conscious of this. So the information which enters can damage the body much more than you are persuaded of the damage. And lastly, when you want to transmit the information, it is 10 raised to the power 7 bits. So in general, you see that there is a loss of this number of there's a loss of this number of 10 raised to the power 2 bits when you want to transmit it. This is why if you take a small experiment with your classmates, you can place yourself at one side of the class and then speak in the ears of your classmate a sentence. You'll realize that by the time that sentence is going to arrive to the last member of the classmate, in the class, you're going to see that the sentence will have completely changed in sense. This is because of a depreciation of the transmission which occurs via the hearing and mouth. So now, stimulus processing and information coding. So now in this portion, you now see how it's possible to now integrate, to code a particular information which enters the body. So this is stimulus. At the level, the stimulus is entering the body. So how do we code? And this portion is coding here. So in order to code, you see that what happens is that the stimulus is going to increase with time. So as the stimulus increases with time, it's going to attain a threshold of the generator potential. It first starts with generator potential here. So it's going to attain the threshold of the generator potential. So the generator potential is going to give some impulses. So now, as it's going to give some impulses, these are the impulses which come from the sense organs. The main sense organs are going to give these impulses, and they are going to transfer these impulses now into the different nerves, the different neurons. So as they are going to transfer to different neurons, they are going to now go via a propagation mechanism, and that propagation mechanism is going to be now an action potential. Here was the sensor potential or generator potential, which is represented as such, but the action potential is represented as such. Now, as it's going to come into at the level of the brain, the processing is going to decode. In order to process the information that was here, you need to decode. So as the first action potential comes, it's going to do a summation, a temporal summation of the second action potential. This is per unit time, and it's going to do a temporal summation, third action potential. So you see that this is stimulus is slightly resembling this one, but there is a loss of information. This is why up here you see that there was loss of information. So as you are coding, there is a small loss of information. So what is perceived is not actually what is found at the level of the sense organ. So this is why the human body being taken as a reference point of measurement is not a very useful aspect in physics. So now you need now to recode. So at this level, after the processing, you have consciousness, and the recoding is you now used for a reflex. So if you have heat and you want to remove directly your hand, you are going to see that it's going to be recoded. All this information is now going to be recoded and going to pass now as action potentials and go back to the muscles for you to remove your hand from the heat source. So now the next part is the stimulus sensor and action potential relationship. So this is the next part. So at this portion, you have transduction, you have transformation here. So what happened is that the sensor potential and the stimulus, from here you need to know that the stimulus and the sensor potential are directly proportional. So from here you see that as the stimulus, you need to know very well that the stimulus and the sensor potential are directly proportional, but the stimulus and the action potential are not directly proportional. The action potential always stop at the level of plus 20 millivolts. Action potential do not increase much more than that. What is used to code for the intensity of the stimulus is not the amplitude of action potential, but it is the frequency of action potential. So from here you see that the stimulus is directly proportional to a sensor potential. The sensor potential increases the value of the voltage of the different sense organs are going to increase with the stimulus, as you see here. So they're directly proportional. But the action potential is all or nothing. They are respecting the all or nothing law. They are not increasing with the level of the stimulus. All the action potential are going to stop at the level of plus 20 millivolts or plus 30 millivolts when it arrives at the threshold. There is no increase. Either it passes a threshold or not. Even if it is much more by 1 million times more greater than the threshold, it is always going to send the same action potential. So what calls for this for the intensity of the stimulus is the action potential frequency. So that's the action potential frequency can be defined as the number of action potential which are transmitted per unit second. So from here we see that the sensor potential, action potential frequency are directly proportional. So you can imply indirectly that action potential frequency and stimulus are directly proportional, and not action potential against stimulus. Action potential and stimulus are not directly proportional, but it is going to form a straight line. It's going to be constant. So now this is contrasting. What is contrasting? Contrasting is a part of neurophysiology which is used now in the precise location of the part which is being stimulated. So let's say that you have different nerves at the different let's say that these different nerves are located on the big finger, on the thumb. Let's say that all these nerves are located on the thumb. Now there is a particular portion of the thumb, let's say the middle portion. This one is the lateral portion. Let's say that this portion is the median portion of the thumb, and this portion is the lateral portion of the thumb, and this portion is the intermediate portion. I stimulate the intermediate portion with touch. So what will happen is that the intermediate portion is going to cause a lateral inhibition of the medial and the lateral portion, to say that the impulses does not come from you. It's going to reduce the impulse that's going to come from the different one, and it's going to be the main one which is stimulated. So this one are also going to have impulses, but their impulse are going to be low due to the lateral inhibition that the intermediate neuron are going to perform on these medial and lateral neurons of the thumb. So you also see that the lateral inhibition that they will also induce is going to be much more less than the lateral inhibition that the intermediate one is going to inhibit. And all this is used to make sure that the body recognizes the specific portion that you are going to have an impulse, for the localization of the impulses in the body. Such that when someone touches your hand, you do not feel that sensation at the level of the leg. So the contrasting is very, very crucial for this. After all this, we are going to now pass to the first sense organ, which is called the skin. So the sense of touch. Now the sense of touch is going to act via different sensors. So now these sensors, you have the number one, the Meissner corpuscle, which are directly below the level of the epidermis and very far above the dermis. So you have the Meissner corpuscle, number one. Number two, we have the Merkel cells. Number three, we have the Ruffini corpuscles. Number four, we have the nerve fibers. So we have small nerve fibers which are used to take heat and temperature. Number five, you have the persistent corpus which are used to take vibration and deep pressure. These are tactile touch. Meissner corpus are located mostly at the level of the finger, the tip of finger, for tactile touch. The Merkel cells are similar to that for tactile touch. The Ruffini are used for pressure, that's why they are slightly below, and here they are used, the Pacinial curves are used for large pressures. So now let's visualize now the response of the skin sensor for pressure, touch, and vibration. So what happens is that we first start with pressure. So with pressure, as you are going to increase the mass of you are going to increase the pressure, which is represented by mass of a certain substance. So as you increase it, what's happening is that the graph of stimulus of weight against the action potential per unit second. I told you initially that if the intensity of the stimulus is not measured with the action potential, but instead with the number of action potential per unit time, that is the action potential frequency. So we are going to see that as the stimulus of the weight increases, this is also going to increase. Let's say now we go now to the next one, which is vibration. So the rate of change of weight. So if you change now the weight, you now change the weight, the pressure, and you are going to have this. So the change of pressure, you see that the steepness of this graph, it is much more than this graph. So what happens is that the body consider a greater perception of the change in pressure than the change in pressure per unit time than the change in pressure, just the change in pressure. And this other one have a much more higher steepness. So this is the most precise one with the rate of velocity change of the pressure. So now the next portion we are going to deal with will be the response of the thermosensors. We need to know that the cold sensors, we have the cold sensors and we have the heat sensors. Now the question is, if you touch the cold sensors are carried out by fibers which are very rapid, and the heat sensors are carried out by fibers which are slightly slow in movement. So these fibers which are carrying the heat are much more better, which are they are better cells, and they are not very myelinated, but this one are highly myelinated. So the cold sensors, you have this portion here, it starts at the level of this portion here, 37 degrees Celsius, and the hot sensors start at the level of 35 degrees Celsius. So you see that at the middle portion, which is 36.5 degrees Celsius or 37.5 degrees Celsius, so the cold start at something like 38 degrees Celsius, this one 37 degrees Celsius, but at the middle of 37.5, you don't feel neither cold nor hot at this portion here. Now when you go below 35 degrees Celsius, now you start feeling cold. And when you go above this temperature here, which is 37.5 degrees Celsius, now start feeling heat. So this is all what you need to visualize with the sensor stimulation, the thermosensor stimulation. Now we have the proprioceptors, the proprioception simulation. Now with the proprioception simulation, you need to know that with proprioception, there is what we need, there is the angle of movement with proprioception, and there is the velocity of movement with proprioception. So now this one has the same angle of movement is involved with this proprioception, but with different velocity. The first one with blue is going to have a slow velocity. The second one with black is going to have a medium velocity, and this one is going to have a fast velocity. But this one are going to have similar velocity but different angles. So you have this first angle that's going to move, this second angle that's going to move, and this third angle that's going to move. So now how is this information now integrated at the level of the brain? So what happens is that per unit time you have action potential. So the action potential, what happens is that for the one which is slow in movement, but all of them are going to end at the same position. So the brain is going to analyze this first scenario as having this slow is going to have a slow steepness, and then all of them are going to attain the same action potential. So even if you move from fast to slow, you need to know that the slow one is going to have a slow steepness of the action potential frequency, and then all of them are going to have the same position at the end. So for the medium, you see that the steepness is slightly higher than the slow one. For the fast one, you see the steepness is much more higher. So all this is a method of integration to make sure that it is the velocity of change of the different angle of the different joints. So this next one is going to be involved now when we don't have a velocity change, but in this case you have an angle change. So this small angle change you are going to have, you see that all of them have the same velocity, so the stiffness is going to be quite the same. So the body is going to analyze that. Since the stiffness now is same, you see it's going to analyze that at the level of that joint there is going to be the same velocity, but at this position here the body is going to analyze that it's going to have different velocity, with this blue one the smallest velocity and this red one the larger velocity. At this position it's going to analyze that the body has the same velocity, but since they are not ending at the same level of action potential at the end, the body is going to analyze that this plateau action potential is going to be for the small angle, this one for the medium angle, and this one for the large angle. But this, you realize that all of them at this position are going to end at the same plateau, so the body is going to analyze that all of them are moving at the same, are going to end at the same angle. So that was for proprioception. So now let's see the next body, the body sense organ, which is the muscle prespindle, which is used now in terms of stretching. So now the muscle spindles are constituting of two main fibers. You have the nuclear chain fibers. You have the nuclear chain fibers. You have the nuclear chain fibers, and you have the nuclear chain fibers, the long one, and you have the nuclear back fibers. The nuclear back fibers, which have the big this big site here. So now the nuclear chain fibers both have the nuclear chain fibers both have the IA and the double I afferent neurons. Afferent neurons are the neurons that are taking sensation from the peripheral part of the body to the central nervous system. So they contain both IA and I2 afferent neurons, while the nuclear part only contain the IA. Now when they come, when the impulse is going to come from this for motor stimulation, impulse come from motor stimulation and are going to come via the alpha motor neurons. While then when impulse comes via the alpha motor neurons, are going to end at the level of the muscle fibers, the direct muscle fibers. But the impulse stimulation which are going to enter the level of the muscle spindles are going to be via the alpha motor neurons. So now let's continue with the reflexes of the muscle spindles. So at initial length of the muscle, what happened is that you need to, the first thing to pinpoint is that the Golgi tendon body, the next, which is the next sensor that you're going to visualize, is used to control muscle contraction. The Golgi tendon body is used to control muscle contraction, while the muscle spindle, which is this one which are involving now, is used to control the muscle stretching. So some reflexes are going to be involved with different diseases, which are used to visualize if the functioning of the muscle spindle or not. So now let's visualize it. So initial, you have the initial length of the muscle. So with initial level of muscle, what happens is that no impulse are going to come via the main fiber of the the muscle spindle is the IA, while the main fiber of the Golgi tendon body is the IB. So you see that no impulse is going to be transmitted with the initial length. You see that no impulse is going to be transmitted, or only few small impulse going to transmitted to this. So with the initial length of the muscle, you see that the small impulse is going to be transmitted via the IA. So it's going to cause both the contraction of the alpha motor neurons and the gamma motor neurons, which are going to cause now the normal muscle tone of the body. This is why you realize that a human being who is living has a normal muscle tone. That normal muscle tone is due to this reflex action, which is coming from the IA. Is going to come now to act with, is going to synapse with the alpha motor neuron, which is going to contract the muscle. So this is used in order for you to have a more normal muscle tone, a normal muscle contraction. So this is why if you touch your bicep just now, you see that you feel that the bicep has a small tone that it has. Now the next one is when you have a muscle stretching. Let's say that you have a muscle stretching, like in case of a tendon reflex, the patellar tendon reflex. So the patellar tendon reflex is also involved with the muscle stretching, a direct muscle stretching. So what happens is that the IA are going to take now very large impulses, and these large impulses are going to cause a direct contraction of the alpha motor neurons. So now this other one is for supraspinal activation. Supraspinal activation is when you have impulses coming from your primary motor cortex when you want to do a voluntary change in muscle length. So you are going to affect the alpha motor neuron and the gamma motor neuron here. So now let's see now how the monosynaptic stretch reflex works. The monosynaptic stretch reflex is going to work via the IA fibers, because I initially told you that the IA fibers are the fibers that are controlling the muscle length or the muscle stretch. So what happens is that with patellar tendon reflex, you are trying to contract. You are trying to flex the knee joint. So when we are flexing the knee joint, we are stretching this muscle here. So we have this muscle, the quadriceps femoris. So when we are flexing the knee joint, we are stretching the quadriceps femoris. So upon flexing the knee joint, we stretch the quadriceps femoris, and when we stroke at the level of the patella, it gives an intense number of flexion. So when we strike the patella, it's going to cause an intense stretching of the quadriceps femoris. So this is going to activate the muscle spindles, and then it's going to give fibers to the IA, to impulse to IA fibers. Then it's going to cause a monosynaptic stretch. So this is a monosynaptic. This is not going to have two synapses. So you're going to have monosynaptic, and you're going to send to the alpha fibers back to the muscle, which is going to cause a contraction and going to cause a lifting of the leg. Now you have this other one, the polysynaptic circuit. Now with the polysynaptic circuit, what happens is that in this case you have this muscle. So what happens is that if you have let's say stretch on this muscle here, if you have stretch on this quadriceps muscle, or on this quadriceps femoris muscle, the fibers is going to move via this is going to be an extensor from the extensor. So you are going to have impulses from the IA and the double I from the extensors. So these are going to move, and they are going to cause a stimulation. So this, in order for the rectification here, is that this need to contract and this need to relax. So what is going to happen is that it's going to move and going to do a monosynaptic, and going to cause a stimulation of the extensor, and it's going to cause an inhibition. This fiber here is inhibitory, and it's going to cause an inhibition to the flexor, this flexor here, so that it stretches directly. So this is when you have an extensor. This is when you have the extensor impulse. The impulse due to the stretching of the quadriceps femoris. Now let's say that you have the extension. You have instead the contraction of the quadriceps femoris, extensive contraction of the quadriceps femoris. What will happen is that the IB fibers which are taken from the Golgi tendon bodies are going to take impulses. So the impulses from the IB fibers, which are going to come, this is what shows here. You have the Golgi tendon bodies at the level of the tendon of the fiber here, and you have the IB fibers which are taking the impulses. So now what happens is that this IB fibers will take impulse from contraction of the quadriceps femoris, are now going to do first here an inhibition to this muscle here. So it's going to cause an inhibition to the extensor muscle. Since the extensor muscle is doing excessive contraction, it's going to cause the inhibition to extensor muscle, and it's going to cause a stimulation via a polysynapse. You see that it is passing via an interneuron for it to pass now to the flexor. So it's going to cause now the stimulation of the flexor, so that this flexor contract and this one is going to relax, when at the initial part you had an extensive contraction of this quadriceps femoris. So this is what is involved with the polysynaptic circuit. Now we need now to visualize now other parts. Now, like the nociception. Now the question is, how does nociception come about? With nociception, we need to know that we have sensation. With nociception, when you had an injury, you have the different inflammatory chemicals which are released, and these are the different inflammatory chemicals that are going to cause nociception. Example of these inflammatory chemicals: you have bradykinin, you have prostaglandin E2, and you have serotonin. All of them are these are inflammatory chemicals which can cause pain stimulation. Now, also, or you can have a mechanical stimulation. These are chemical stimulation of pain, and you can also have a mechanical stimulation of pain via a needle. Now, for desensitization, the chemical desensitization of pain, you can have via opioids. You can have SIH, and you have galanin. So all of these are going to cause some mechanical desensitization for you not to feel again pain, and other analgesics. So now what happens is that the impulses which are coming from nociception are going to pass here, and are going to enter the dorsal root into this particular neuron here. So into this interneuron. So they are going to now pass. You see that you realize that the nociception, as you are going to see below here, are going to pass via the spinothalamic pathway. So you need to know that we have the spinothalamic or the anterolateral pathway that the nociception impulse are going to pass. So pain and temperature are moving via the anterolateral or the spinothalamic pathway. It's going to pass anterolaterally to anteriorly and laterally to the next portion, next hemisection of the spinal cord into upward, as you see here. So now we are going to explain what is referred pain. So a referred pain is a pain which is having an initial location, but it is referring on another location. Example: in case of a heart ischemia, you have a referred pain on the lower part of your hand, of your left hand. So you have a referred pain to the lower part of your left hand. The question is, why does it happen as such? So the referred pain is occurring as such because the impulses, the sensory impulses which are taking nociception, are not the somatic sensory neurons. The sensory impulses which are taking impulses for pain, in this case of heart ischemia, are not the somatic sensory neurons, but they are the autonomic sensory neurons which are taking impulses from the heart ischemia, because the heart is a visceral structure. Since the heart is a visceral structure, then they are the autonomic or the visceral sensory system which are going to take the impulses to bring it to the central nervous system. Now you have the somatic sense which is shown in purple here. The somatic sense is shown in purple have certain location, on the specific location on the spinal cord, where they are going to give their path. So in this case, the specific location which is innervating, all this part is the phrenic nerve. The phrenic nerve is going to innervate all this part with part of this location here. So it's going to have this portion here, and now the autonomic visceral portion is going to give again the fibers to that portion, to that interneuron which is taken from the phrenic nerve. So you see that the pain is going to be referred via the root of the phrenic nerve, but it is not going to be somatic. That is, the person is not having a particular or a fixed pain at that particular location. So the contrasting measures, so you have seen above here contrasting. The contrasting ability is not going to occur there, so you cannot have a precise location of the pain on the body, since the pain is coming from the visceral location. Now let's visualize now how the pain is controlled. So now you have the ascending nociceptive tract and you have the descending nociceptive tract. In order to inhibit the essential nociceptive tract are used in order to inhibit the pain. So you have here the pain from the face, and you have here this pain from the body, the trunk and the limbs. So what happens is that when you have the nociceptors which are affected, which are stimulated, they are going to bring the fibers. They are going to have impulses. Now the impulses from the nociceptors, the nerves which are involved here are the alpha A delta fibers and the C fibers. Now the question is what is the significance of this A, the delta, and all that? We need to know that the A, when we write the letter A to A, B, C, D, is used to show the level of myelination. The letter A, B, C, D is used to show the level of myelination. So this fiber here, A, shows that it is highly myelinated, and the more you are going far away from A to C, it shows that they are more unmyelinated. So this fiber here is going to transmit faster impulses compared to this C fiber. Now the Greek letters alpha, beta, gamma, and delta are used to show the level of thickness. So the thickness of the neuron, the alpha, beta, gamma, and delta are used to show the thickness of neuron. Alpha neuron are the largest, because the alpha neurons, so these are the most myelinated. Alpha neurons are the largest. The beta are smaller than the alpha, the gamma are smaller than the beta, and the delta are smaller than the gamma. So these are the significance of these different letters here. So you see that A delta are going to be myelinated and they're going to be small. So they're going to transmit impulses now to the central nervous system at the level of spinal cord. Now in the spinal cord, what happens is that there is going to be a reflex sympathetic axon, sympathetic contraction. So you see here that the motor axon are going to be stimulated, and there's going to be a reflex sympathetic stimulation. So you have a reflex sympathetic stimulation and the motor axon. So this is why when you have let us say a stomach pain, if you have a belly pain, what happens is that usually you are constipated. So this is because of the sympathetic axon movement. And also we also know that when you have a belly pain, you can contract your rectus muscles, your different rectus muscle with the muscle of the abdominal wall. So you can contract these muscles because of the motor axon reflex here. So this is why. And also if you have a pain at the level of the leg, you involuntarily contract the leg because of the motor axon here. So this is a reflex system. And now the next thing which can occur is because of this. So you have this the C fibers, they are going to pass on to here, and then they are going to move up here. So the pain sensation, as I initially told you, is going to move via the spinal thalamic tract or the anterolateral pathway. So this is called anterolateral pathway because it's passing anteriorly and laterally to the next hemisection of the spinal cord. And it's called spinothalamic tract because it moves from the spinal cord directly to the thalamus without any synapse. So this is why it's called the spinothalamic tract. Now also here from the skin, you also have the nociceptor, the C and the alpha delta fibers. All of them are going to contract here. But now you know that on the face, you need to know that on the face, at the level of the pons, there is no nuclei on the pons for the sympathetic axon, for sympathetic stimulation. There is no nuclei on the pons for sympathetic stimulation. This is why here when they are going to take impulse from the face, there is only going to be a motor axon, and the pons consist of nerves like the trigeminal nerve and the fascial nerve. So the motor axons are going to have the contraction of the different fascial muscles that you are going to have. So this is what you are going to have. Now in this case, you are going to have motor axon to the fascial nerve, and the person is going to have some grimace on the face. So now the next thing you are going to have also is this anterolateral pathway. So when the synapse is going to pass through the anterolateral pathway, move now to the thalamus. The portion of the thalamus which are going to control, which are going to have the spinal thalamic tract synapsing with, is the medial thalamus and lateral thalamus, and all of them are seen inside the neuroanatomy tutorial. So you've seen this, and they are going to now move at the level of the primary somatic cortex. So all of these are the area with which of movement, the ascending nociceptive tract. Now we have the descending nociceptive tract. Descending nociceptive tract is trying to inhibit the pain so that the person do not feel again. So it's going to adapt the person. So if you have pain on a particular location for a long period of time, at a certain period of time, you're not going to have the sensation of pain again because of this inhibitory tract. So now you need to know that the inhibitory tract can come from the primary somatic sensory area. So one is going to come from the primary somatic sensory area, another one is going to come from the hypothalamus. So all of these two nuclei are going to give some impulses, inhibitory impulses, to the central gray layer. The central gray layer is found just beside the this particular part here, the aqueduct of Sylvius, because the aqueduct of Sylvius is a portion which is going to connect. So you have this aqueduct of Sylvius. So you are going to have the central gray matter at the level of aqueduct of Sylvius here. So hypothalamus and this are going to synapse at this portion, and at the portion still of the midbrain, you have part of the lateral reticular formation. The reticular formation area, the portion of the brain which control the level of consciousness. So for you can see somebody who is drowsy when he's sleeping. This is because of the reticular formation. The reticular formation is inactivated when he's sleeping, but when it comes now to a healthy state, you see that the drowsiness goes because of reticular formation has been activated. So now the reticular formation, lateral reticular formation, now give the fibers also to synapse at the level of medial reticular system, and all these fibers from the central gray layer are also going to to give to the medial reticular formation. And also these two fibers can also come from the nucleus raffimagnus. So we have also the nucleus raffimagnus. All of them are going to send their fibers now to this portion here, in order for you to have a sympathetic axon stimulation and a motor axon stimulation, and also an inhibition of this spinothalamic pathway. So you see that it's going to come here, that inhibitory tract, to inhibit the because here you are going to have you also have a segmental inhibition. These fibers are going to come and stimulate the spinothalamic tract, but they also come here and inhibit the spinothalamic tract so that the impulses should be reduced, and also going to cause more motor axon, sympathetic axon impulses. So now the next part is going to be the withdrawal reflex. The withdrawal reflex is a reflex which is involving many neurons. Let's say that you are moving and you have pins at this level of the leg. So usually what happens is that you are going to remove this leg from the pin, and you are going to stand on the other leg for support. So you already know some muscles can be involved now in this withdrawal reflex. So what will happen here when you have stimulus? The stimulus here is going to be the pain sensation. So it's going to move up here via the different pains, the different fibers that we have already described. We said A delta fibers and the C fibers are going to take it. Since they take this impulse of pain, they are going to move now in the ipsilateral portion of the ipsilateral is the same side. When we say ipsilateral, it's the same side of the spinal cord, the same side of spinal cord and the nerve which is taking that impulse. And contralateral side is on the opposite side of the spinal cord, and the opposite of the nerve which is taking the impulse. So you have impulse coming from here. It's going to take ipsilaterally. What happens is that it is going to you see that the green is stimulatory and the orange is inhibitory. So what happens is that it's going to come here. It's going to stimulate the interneuron, this flexor. So I initially told you they are going to try to contract and remove the leg here. So it's going to stimulate all the flexors of the leg which is in pain. So all the flexors of the leg which is in pain are going to be stimulated. So this is going to be stimulated. These are the hamstring muscles that are going to be stimulated, and all the muscles of the anterior compartment of the leg are going to be stimulated. So that you're going to have a foot contraction. You have the foot contraction, and also have the contraction at the level of the knee to remove your leg. And contralaterally on this other leg, what is going to happen is that as the stimulation comes, it is going to cause a stimulation of this one, the extensor. All the extensors are going to be stimulated at the contralateral side, and the flexors are going to be inhibited. All the flexors are not going to be contracted. They are going to be inhibited on this side, the flexors. So for you to stand on the other leg, and here the flexors are going to be stimulated and the extensors are going to be inhibited. So now the question, since you have spoken about inhibition and stimulation, now the question is, how do presynaptic inhibition and postsynaptic inhibition occur? So in this case, you have a presynaptic inhibition. Here, if the inhibitory interneuron does not give any impulse, you see that the stimulatory transmission is going to continue. So this is going to attain the threshold. This is the threshold frequency here. As the threshold frequency is attained, when it is increasing, an action potential is going to be transmitted directly. So the action potential is transmitted at the level of the axon heel lock. So you see that the axon has many dendrites, so it's going to have different temporal and spatial summation from the different sensory potentials. So from the different nerves, so it's going to have all these, and now when it's going to attain the threshold of the neuron which is involved, then action potential is going to be stimulated. Now in this case, when they are inhibited, what happens is that you can have this is presynaptic inhibition. You can have this particular neuron which is still sending impulses are being sent, but you have a presynaptic inhibition which is inhibiting the neuron that is sending impulses. So what happens is that you are going to have a reduction of the stimulus below the threshold, so no action potential is going to be sent. In this case, you have a postsynaptic inhibition. Postsynaptic inhibition can be either feedback inhibition or a feed-forward inhibition. So what happens is that you have this particular fiber, which is the fiber which is stimulating the other neurons here. So it's stimulating the other interneurons. So what happens now is that this fiber is going to stimulate this one here, is going to stimulate this one here, and it's going to stimulate this one here. In case of a feedback inhibition, what happens is that when this one is stimulated, this interneuron is stimulated, it's going to send the axon collateral to this other cell here, which is going to inhibit them. So this is a Renshaw cell. So this is a feed forward because the impulse first go forward, then as it has gone forward, now there's a feedback which is going to be for them to be feedback, because it's a feedback is going to move now back via the Renshaw cells to these different interneurons. Now we have a feed forward inhibition. Here what happens is that this fiber here is stimulating both this one and this one. This one is found forward to this one, so this one now is going to inhibit this one so that it should not even start with the impulse transmission. So now, sensory centers of the brain. With the sensory centers of the brain, we have the different. We said that the sensory center of the brain is the postcentral gyrus, or the primary somatic area. So we have this primary postsomatic area. We have now the primary projection area of vision at the level, the primary optic area or vision center. We have this area here, the primary projection for hearing, and we have this area here for thalamus. The thalamus, which is the area of relay for all the neurons of sensation in the body. So we have the somatotopic organization. This is a somatotopic organization of the body. So at this portion, you have the genitals, which can have a small portion here. You have the legs here, the body with the palms huge, and the face very large, the throat and the tongue here. So this is what happens. Now we have the somatosensory tract. So now what happens with the somatosensory tract? I initially told you that there are going to be two tracts which are involved now in the movement of the sensation. The anterolateral pathway, which is moving via the spinothalamic tract, is going to contain both the fiber for nociceptors, so that is pain and for temperature. So pain and temperature move via the anterolateral pathway here. They're going to move here. The synapse at this portion here at the posterior horn. As the synapse at the posterior horn, they pass here. They pass via this column, the spinothalamic tract. So you have the spinothalamic tract in the anterior lateral funiculus. So we have the anterior lateral funiculus that are going to pass here in the spinothalamic tract. So they are going to pass via the anterolateral funiculus. So you have this anterolateral follicles here. They move up via the spinothalamic tract, and then they are going to end at the level of the posterior lateral ventral nuclei of the thalamus. Now, for the case of the touch receptor, the proprioception and even tactile touch and vibration, you have touch, proprioception, and vibration. They are going to move now via this other pathway here called the medial lemniscal pathway. So you have it is called the medial lemniscal pathway, or the dorsal fasciculus. So you have different fasciculus. You need to know that as they are going to move via the dorsal pathway here, the dorsal column major, it's also called the dorsal column medial lemniscal pathway. So this is a dorsal column medial lemniscal pathway. It is called as such because it is moving here. It is not synapsing at the level of spinal cord as in case of the anterolateral pathway. It's going to move directly dorsally via still this first order neuron. So the dorsal column, as it moves here, is going to now synapse now at the level of two nuclei. You have the posterior funicular nuclei, you have the gracile nucleus, and you have the funicular nuclei. So you have two nuclei that are going to synapse. So they are still called, they are going to still move through the fascicle coniatus and the fascicle gracilis. So they are going to synapse with the coniatus nuclei and the gracile nuclei. These are the two nuclei that are going to synapse, and then they are going to move now. They are going to decussate here. You need to know that decussation needs to occur. So in order to make sure that the contralateral brain control the side of the body which is contralateral to it. So you have this, and the medial lemniscal fibers are going to take now to steal the posterior lateral ventral nuclei of the thalamus. Now the trigeminal nerve directly come and it does the decussation at the level of the pons, and then it's going to give to the posterior median ventral nuclei of the thalamus, and all of them are going to end at this position. Now we need to know that a small error has been done, because we initially said that at this portion here is going to transmit fibers. So this comes from the body, so this is going to be at this level here. So from the posterior is going to come at this portion, and this other one is going to come at this portion, and all of them are going to pass via the internal, no, not the internal capsule this time around. So when you want to move the body, let's say now in this case I want to move my arm. So this part of the tutorial involves now with the how to control the motor system. So now we have the event for decision to move to execution of the movement. So from decision to execution of movement. So now we start first with decision. You know that internally in your body you have a certain mind. At the mind, we don't know the location of the mind, but that's one that can be also already seen metaphysically. So the mind, you have a mind inside you, and that mind is the one which is going to take the decision making. So now that mind is connected now into your physical body, which is the brain. So as it's connected to a physical body, which is the brain, you are going to have all decision making. You cannot, scientists cannot go further than decision making or where the decision comes, because that is not more involving the physical science but the metaphysical science, with the mind existing in a metaphysical world. So now you have this decision making. Let's say I want the ball. That's the decision you want. You are going to have the cortical. After having that perception in your mind, it is going to be connected now to your brain physically. So you are going to have cortical and subcortical motivation areas, which are going to have all these impulses. And I don't like usually to involve this with because it's not really physical and tangible. It is much more abstract. All this decision making with the level of, it's not really proved that they really come from here. So but I prefer going to directly to the programming method. The programming now is when all this, you have the integration of the mind that you want the ball. Now you want to program now. The programming now involves how you are going to take the ball. So as the information has arrived, the primary somatic primary motor cortex and the premotor cortex, all of them are going to send first their fibers to the basal ganglia and to the cerebellum. So what is the use of the basal ganglia here? The basal ganglia is going to So you are going to have impulses sent from the primary somatic and primary motor cortex to the basal ganglia. The basal ganglia now is used to refine, because the impulses usually come from the primary motor cortex are crude impulses. The impulses are not fine. So the contraction if the contraction comes directly from the primary motor cortex, it will be very rude. So if you want to take a pen and write, it will be very difficult. So it needs to first go and pass into the basal ganglia and to the cerebellum. So in the basal ganglia is going to reduce the number of impulse in order for it to be refined. Just like oil coming directly from groundnut and oil which has been refined. So the impulses the impulse first go to the basal ganglia for the impulse to be refined and tuned, for it to be very specific. When you move your hand or you dance, you move your hand in a particular way, in a fine or tuned manner. You see, like in a surgical operation, all of these are moving from the basal ganglia, impulse from the basal ganglia. They're going to send impulse from the basal ganglia. Now the next one, they're also going to send impulse to the cerebellum. Example, we know that when you want to dance, you need some form of balances. So all these balances need to be controlled by the cerebellum. So these balances are going to the impulse are first going to go to the cerebellum to ask to the cerebellum, grand frère, how will I do in order for me to do this movement best. So the cerebellum now is going to program a way such that is going to explain the primary motor cortex for it to send the impulses down to the body. So now, as the impulse has been programmed, what happened is that the cerebellum and the basal ganglia are going to send back information to the primary motor cortex. As they send back information in primary motor cortex, the primary motor cortex now, you need to move now to the next one, which is the command to move. Now you have a command to move now, moving back from the primary. Now the primary motor cortex now has all the information to perform movement. So you have now this primary motor cortex sending fibers now down to the spinal cord for you to have an execution of movement. So you are going to have a fine and tuned movement than a crude movement, a crude contraction or extension. Now let's visualize the descending motor tracts. At first we have seen the ascending sensory tracts. Now we are going to visualize the descending motor tract. The motor tracts are going to come from the somatic motor area or the primary motor cortex, and you also have the premotor cortex in front of it. So now, as it comes from the cortex, it's going to pass through the internal capsule. The internal capsule is located between the thalamus and you have this nuclei between the putamen and the globus pallidus. The putamen and globus pallidus, all of them are going to be called the lentiform nucleus. So the internal capsule is going to pass between it's not going to enter the thalamus, unlike the sensory part of the brain which are all entering into the thalamus. The motor, as it descends down, is not going to pass into the thalamus. It's going to pass between the thalamus and the lentiform nucleus. In that space is going to be called the internal capsule. So you're going to have the internal capsule. So as it passes, it gives some shock from some tract here to the stratum, to the thalamus, the red nucleus, the pons, the olive. So it gives fibers to the red nucleus, the pons, and olive for it to go now to give motor sensation to the head and to the head. So the red nucleus will give sensation to the oculomotor nerve. The pons will give sensation to the trigeminal nerve, the fascial nerve. The olives at the level of the medulla is going to give to the different nerves which are going to arise from the medulla. So you have the fascial nerve, the glossopharyngeal nerve, the vagus nerve. You have the olive, and you have the reticular formation in order for you to have sensation to be conscious. So now it's going to descend. Now as it comes down, it gives a corticobulbar tract which is going to now move to the medulla. It's going to give some other fibers to pons, but the main bulk is going to move here. It's going to also give to the nucleus coniatus and gracilis. So but the main bulk comes here. As it comes here at the level of the medulla, it's find the pyramidal decussation. So you have the pyramids here, and you have the pyramidal decussations. So when you have this decussation, it now moves now into the spinal cord. So you have the lateral corticospinal tract. This is now lateral. So lateral corticospinal tract, this is first one. There's another one which is going to move, but it is only few. The lateral corticospinal tract are containing the fibers from the contralateral part of the brain. So of the cerebellum. So you have this lateral corticospinal tract, that the main bulb, and they are going to synapse now with the alpha and the gamma motor neurons, which are going to give to the different muscles on the contralateral side of the body. So now you have again this other one, the ventral corticospinal tract. The ventral corticospinal tract will take impulses from the ipsilateral side of the brain. You see that this one does not decussate at the pyramid, goes directly, it comes down and then continues. Lastly, I'm going to have the somatotopic organization. Somatotopic organization of the primary motor cortex is similar to that of the primary sensory cortex, with the leg here, the hand here, the head here, and the tongue here. But the localization, you see that the head is looking on this side, but that one was looking to me up, as we could see up here. So it's slightly different. So now let's visualize. Now initially we said that on the programming you had a part which was involving that the impulses should first move to the basal ganglia. So now we need to visualize the basal ganglia, afferent and efferent tract. So before we visualize the basal ganglia, we first need to put in mind that the basal ganglia is used in the control of the impulse which come from the primary motor cortex. Now the primary motor cortex has excessive impulses. The primary motor cortex has excessive impulses on the contraction or extension or the performance of a movement. So now the basal ganglia is now used in the tuning of these motions. So the amplitude of this motion are very large, and the number of frequencies of action potential that the primary motor cortex is going to send on the neuron for the movement are very large in number. So the activity of the basal ganglia is not a stimulatory activity on the primary motor cortex, but it's instead going to be an inhibitory activity on the primary motor cortex. So that's what you need to put in mind. It is going to be an inhibitory and not a stimulatory activity. So this is why you see that the basal ganglia are mostly inhibiting. So when the output of the basal ganglia is inhibiting, then they are trying to retune the impulse that has come to condemn. So this is all the impulse that has come to them. Now they try to do an inhibition to retune that impulse. So now all these impulses come via the glutamate neurons. So you have all the glutamate neurons that are going to enter here. So you need to first know the constituent of the basal ganglia. We have the lentiform nucleus and we have the stratum. The lentiform nucleus consists of the putamen and globus pallidus, and the stratum consists of the coded nucleus and the putamen. All this you will see in the neuroanatomy tutorials, which we were seen in the first part of the section. So all the fibers come from the primary motor cortex, that the glutamate neurons. Then it comes and enter into the putamen. So as it enters in the putamen here, you have the putamen. The putamen has different nuclei. So you have one nuclei here, which is going to be, the putamen has one nuclei here, which is going to be inhibitory. Is going to be, as the putamen is stimulated, one nuclei is going to be inhibitory to the globus pallidus internus, and another nuclei is going to be inhibitory to the globus pallidus externus. So this is a pars interna of the globus pallidus, and this is a pars externa of the globus pallidus. Another one is going to be inhibitory to the globus pallidus externus. Another one is going to be inhibitory to the substantia nigra, the pars reticulata. You need to know that the input portion, the substantia nigra, is going to be the pars reticulata, and the output the input portion is pars compacta, and the output portion is the pars reticulata. This R for reticulata and C for compacta. So you see that the as it's going to receive the glutamate neuron receive fibers from the primary motor cortex, is going to be inhibitory to all of these nuclei. So it's going to be inhibitory to all of these different bodies. So now the function when this other body is not inhibited, so when this pars externa of the globus pallidus is not inhibited, what it does is that it's going to inhibit the subthalamic nucleus. Subthalamic nucleus is also part of the basal ganglia. So it's going to inhibit part of the subthalamic. It's going to inhibit this part of the subthalamic nucleus. When the subthalamic nucleus is not inhibited, I usually say it's not inhibited, then it's going to be activated. So when it's not inhibited, it's going to activate this part of the globus pallidus, and it's going to activate this part of the globus pallidus, which is the pars internus. When the globus pallidus internus is not inhibited or it is activated, then it's going to inhibit the impulses at the level of the motor thalamus. So this is going to reduce the impulses which are going to come, which are from the primary somatic cortex. Now, when the substantia nigra, pars reticulata is not inhibited via the putamen, then it's going to send impulse of inhibition to the motor thalamus, then which is going to reduce the impulses that are going to come from the primary motor cortex. When the motor thalamus is not inhibited, then it's going to send impulses to the primary motor cortex to continue the way it has sent impulses to these other neurons. So now let's see the case of Parkinsonism. Parkinsonism is a situation that occurs when the substantia nigra cells pars compacta are no more sending their dopaminergic fibers. The dopaminergic fibers of the substantia nigra are damaged. So this D1 and D2 are damaged, but usually the D2 is damaged. So let's visualize how Parkinsonism is going to happen. So let's say in case where the D2 is damaged, so this particular, or let's first in case when D2 is damaged, so you are going to have this D2 is damaged. So what happens is that this part here is not going to be inhibited. So no, let's take D1 in case of D1 which is damaged, which is the main one in case of Parkinsonism. You know that the substantia nigra pars compacta is the one which is involved in the stimulation and inhibition of this other nuclei here. So this the nuclei, when impulse come from the glutamate, is going to give impulse now to the substantia nigra pars reticularis, and it also give impulses to the substantia nigra pars compacta. The substantia nigra pars compacta is the one which is going to inhibit this nuclei to the pars externa and the pars interna of the globus pallidus. So now when the fiber D1 is affected, what happens is that it is not going to stimulate this. So since it's not going to stimulate, then it implies that you are not going to have an inhibition of the pars interna. Since you are not going to have an inhibition of the pars interna, then the pars interna is going to inhibit the motor thalamus. So that's the first case. The second case is when the D2 neuron is affected. So what happens is that it is not going to inhibit this. Since it's not going to inhibit this is going to inhibit this. And since this is inhibited, then it will not inhibit the subthalamic nucleus. Since the subthalamic nucleus is not inhibited, then it's going to activate this, and this is going to inhibit the motor thalamus. So this is the case of the failure in Parkinsonism. So now we have the center, the tracts, and afferent postural motor function. So this is in case of balance. You need to know that the balancing system of the body comes via these main entities. You have the proprioceptor of the neck, you have the basal ganglia, you have the motor cortex, you have the cerebellum, and you have the labyrinth. The motor cortex and the basal ganglia function in the proprioception, postural motor function, in order to maintain your posture by synapse at the level of the red nucleus. So the motor cortex and the basal ganglia all synapse at the level of the red nucleus. The cerebellum is going to synapse at the level of the medial. You have the medial and the lateral reticular formation. So the cerebellum synapse at this position, these two positions, medial and lateral reticular formation. Now, the proprioceptors of the neck are going to synapse at level of medial and lateral formation, and lastly, the labyrinth, which is going to come from the ear, are going to synapse at the level of the vestibular nuclei. So now, when impulses come from the red nucleus, they are going to pass through the rubospinal tract at the lateral column. So we have the rubospinal tract, lateral column here. We have the lateral reticulospinal tract, which is going to take fibers from the lateral reticular formation. It's going to be the lateral reticulospinal tract and the rubospinal tract. All of them are going to be on the lateral column. So now you have the vestibular nuclei and the medial reticulospinal tract are going to be on the medial side and anterior side. So they are going to be on the medial side of the spinal tract. We need to know from here that the rubospinal tract and the lateral reticulospinal tract, all of them are going to be activated. They are going to activate the flexors. They are going to activate the flexors on the. They are going to activate the flexors on the ipsilateral side of the fibers. So they are going to activate all the flexors on the ipsilateral side of the fibers here. So the rubospinal and lateral are going to activate all the flexors on the ipsilateral side. So as it come here, it's going to activate the flexors. But the medial reticulospinal and the lateral vestibulospinal are going to inhibit the flexors on the ipsilateral side. Now, but on the contralateral side, so this is still on the ipsilateral side instead. So on the ipsilateral side, what happens is that all of them are active. So on the ipsilateral side of the fibers, the rubospinal tract and lateral reticulospinal tract, all of them activate the flexors and they are inhibiting the extensors. Why this other one, the medial reticulospinal tract and the lateral vestibulospinal tract, are inhibiting the flexors and activating the extensors. So this is going to happen on some cerebellar diseases and other basal ganglia diseases where you are going to have some postural imbalances. So now let's visualize the tract and function of the cerebellum. Now in this case, when you want to visualize the cerebellum, you need to visualize the cerebellum in two forms. The first form you need to visualize the cerebellum is in case of the inputting system. So that's the first way to visualize the cerebellum, and the second way to visualize the cerebellum is on the outputting system. The inputting visualization of the cerebellum, so you should visualize the cerebellum into three cerebellar parts. We have the neocerebellum, all this part which is in pale blue. We have this other cerebellum here, the paleocerebellum, and we have the archaeocerebellum. Archaeo is new, the new cerebellum. So the neocerebellum is this part here with pale blue. We have the archaeocerebellum, and we have the archaeocerebellum here. So you have the neurocerebellum at this portion here, you have the paleocerebellum at this portion here, and you have the archaeocerebellum at this portion here. So all the inputting, the different inputs which come at the level of the neurocerebellum. So the fibers which are going to enter the level of neurocerebellum come from the cerebrum and the pons only. So all the fibers which come in and enter into the neurocerebellum are from the pons and the cerebellum only. Now fibers which enter now into the paleocerebellum, this greenish one, are coming from the pons and the spinal cord. So the proprioceptors from the spinal cord and the pons are going to enter now into the paleocerebellum, while the fiber will enter in the archaeocerebellum or the flocconodular lobe are going to enter via the vestibular nuclei. So all the from the labyrinth and all the circulus and ampullae which are found here are going to enter via the archaeocerebellum. Now the outputting formats are seen as such. So you have a medial, an intermediate, and the lateral part of the cerebellum which are involved now in the outputting format. So in the outputting format, all what is taken from the medial aspect of the cerebellum are going to enter into the fastigial nucleus. All what are taken in from the intermediate part of the cerebellum are going to enter into the dentate nucleus, and all what are taken from, so we have fastigial nucleus, all what are taken from intermediate part are going to come into the emboliform nucleus, and all what are taken from the lateral part of the cerebellum are going to enter into the dentate nucleus. So all of these are going to enter now into this portion of the different nuclei for the control of posture here. So we see that the fascia, it can be given a mnemonic of Fed. So we have the fascial nucleus is going to pass like that, then it's going to give one of the fiber to this nuclei here. It's going to give another fiber to this nuclei here. This nuclei here is a vestibular nuclei. So the fascial nucleus is going to give one of the fiber to the vestibular nuclei for balancing. It's going to give another fiber. The fascial nucleus is also going to give another fiber to the lateral reticular nucleus, and the fascial nucleus is going to give another fiber again to the primary motor cortex in order for it to control the balancing and posturing. So now we have the emboliform nucleus. Emboliform nucleus gives now fibers, now not to the disease down track, but it's only going to give to the red nucleus and the primary motor cortex. And lastly, we have the dentate fiber, only give to the primary motor cortex. So these two are going to control the oculomotor portion. So this is why when you have you have a problem with the cerebellum, so you are going to have a nystagmus, an uncontrolled movement of the eye upon rotation. So now this next part again is still in order for you to visualize the different new outputting and inputting format. From here you see that the spinal cord, so when sensation comes from the spinal cord, it's going to enter into the paleo-cerebellum, and also from the vestibular part is going to enter also from the arcuocerebellum. All of them, these two parts, are going to go out via the fascial nucleus. Fascial nucleus is going to enter into the lateral reticular formation, the fascial nuclei. All of them are going to control posture at the level of the body, and also is going to move via the thalamus back to the primary motor cortex for the primary motor cortex to control also the movement. So the second part again is when it only moves via the spinal cord and also comes from the brain. So when the inputting comes from the spinal cord and the brain and from the primary motor cortex, you see that an upper part of the brain. So it's going to enter now into the paleo cortex only. So as it enters the paleo cortex only, now it is going to go out not more by the fascial but by the emboliform nucleus. Now the emboliform nucleus gives its fibers to the red nucleus. So the red nucleus now is going to descend and also continue and give fibers now to this, which is going to control the movement of the body. And lastly, when they only come from the bones above, is only going to give the cerebellum is going to come from the bones, only from the bones, and the upper part of the brain. It's going to enter now into the this is the neurocerebellum. As enter into the neurocerebellum, it's going to output from this other lateral part of the cerebellum into the dentate cerebellum, into the dentate nuclei, and the dentate nuclei is going to give fiber up to thalamus and up back to a sponge, which is going to control movement here. So now let's visualize the limbic system. So the limbic system, you need to know that we have some sensory organs, the somatosensory system. So all of them are going to enter now into a limbic system. You have a memory and all the limbic system. So you have all this. Now with the limbic system, the specialization is for us to know what are the constraints of the limbic system. Limbic system, as you are going to see in the new anatomy tutorial, is going to be constituting of the parahippocampal body, the hippocampus, the amygdaloid body, the mammillary body, and even the hypothalamus. So all of them are going to be involved in the limbic system in order for you to control and integrate the different emotions of the body. So now you need to know again that the hypothalamus is very important in the limbic system. You have program, e.g. defense, nutrition, digestion, reproduction. So the hypophysis, all of these are going to enter into the hypophysis. So you have all these are the different mechanism of control of the somatic autonomic nervous system, and all that. All of them are going to execute their function. But the limbic system is all shown here. And the limbic system is also another part which is also used in the control of short-term memory, because located at the level of the temporal lobe of the brain. So now, after visualizing the limbic system, you are going to visualize the cortical layers of the brain. The cortical layers, you need to know that there are 6 layers of the brain. So at the level of the cortex of the brain, there are 6 layers. At the first layer, the first layer here is so the sixth layer is a layer which is mostly taking impulses from below to above, so for integration. So we have the cortical connection. So this one here, you have the cortical connection. So cortical connection is from one cortex, let's say the parietal cortex, so another cortex, the frontal cortex. So one cortical connection goes above here and is going to relate. So also have cortical connections here. So all this, you also have some association fibers and commissural fibers here. So now as it come upward here, to the first layer, in the first layer you are going to see that there are other fibers which are taking there are other cells which are taking fibers from above to below. So the cells are taking fibers from above to below. So you have the pyramidal cells here and you have the pyramidal cells. The pyramidal cells here are these are in red are larger ones, and they are located in the layer 5. These other ones are smaller ones located in layer 3. So when they are going to take the information which comes from the cortical connection and are going to integrate it with some processing. So these are the adjacent or the association fibers and commissural fibers. All of them are going to integrate it. In the cortical layer 4, we have the stellate cells. The stellate cells also are used in integration of the impulses. So all of them are going to bring it now. So you have at the end you are going to have unspecific thalamocortical fiber which are going to come up, because you said that you have the cortical fiber come above. So at this level, which is going to connect with the pyramidal cells, you are going to have unspecific thalamocortical fiber which are going to connect the level of the layer 1. At level of the layer 2, you are going to have commissural fibers which are going to connect the level of layer 2 to pyramidal cells. At level of layer 3, you have association fiber connecting here. At level of layer 4, you have specific thalamocortical fibers. All of them are used now in the integration of, so as they will come here to the thalamus, they are going to be used for the integration of this the different impulses which are going to come from the brain, and all of them are going to descend back down and in use the integration of the body. Now the next part you are going to visualize is going to be the sleep cycle. When somebody is awake and walking, he has usually the alpha electroencephalogram rhythm. So this alpha electroencephalogram rhythm is represented by 8 to 13 hertz frequency. So this is 8 to 13 frequency. So this is a normal method. So when somebody is excited and is has a higher electroencephalogram, you can have 14 to 30. That's a beta. So you have this 14 to 30. And when someone is hypo excited, has a V. So this like that. So it has a V there, which is 4 to 7 hertz. And when said somebody is hypo excited, this one is drowsiness, so that's 0.5 to 3 hertz. And all these other one are abnormal, not true, which are not going to be seen for now. So now in this case, you are going to visualize the sleep cycle. So the sleep cycle can be used by a student who is studying central nervous system. So what's the explanation of this sleep cycle? The explanation of the sleep cycle shows that as you sleep from 0 to 1 hour, you see how you are descending. The level of your electroencephalogram curve is descending from the highest to the lowest at 1 hour. So this shows that what at this delta, the delta here represents their level of hypoactivity. So you have an extensive hypoactivity of the brain. So it is very difficult for you to wake up when you are at 1 hour. You are extensively hypoactive. So if you sleep exactly for 1 hour, it will be very difficult for you to be woke up. So you see that it is a delta. So when you sleep and you are at this level, you are delta. But if you sleep 15 minutes, you can still be woke up because you are at alpha. At this level, you are going to be at alpha. So your level of your electroencephalogram curve is still high. As you descend, you see that when you are coming toward between 1 to 2 hours, as you are moving between 1 to 2 hours, at level of 140, you are going to be, your level is going to move back to this number of frequency, 4 to 7 hits of V here. So this is showing you that you are capable of you're capable of waking up at this time. So if you sleep from 1 to 4 to 140 hours, you are capable of easily waking up, because your electroencephalogram curve is much more higher at this position. Now, when you come again between 2 to 3 hours, you descend again into a very deep hypoactivity at the level of delta. And when you come back again up, you realize that you are going to your resting membrane of sleep is going to increase again to the V. So, and when you sleep again, it descends, then it increases, then it descends. And when it is already more than 6 hours of sleep, you realize that you are going much more than alpha, and you are even increasing and going up to beta. So you are going to be awake at this time. So when you sleep more than 6 hours already, your body is already waking up by itself. So now let's see how the circadian rhythm of circadian rhythm of the body. The circadian rhythm is the organ clock of the body, is regulated by the suprachiasmatic nucleus. So you need to know that the body has an internal clock, and as the internal clock is activated, it's going to produce all this transcription, and all this transcription are going to cause an increase in chloride ion concentrations. So the increased chloride ion concentration is going to cause the activation of the increase in chloride ion concentration is going to cause the activation of the suprachiasmatic nuclear cells. And the suprachiasmatic nuclear cells are going to activate all these different parts of the brain. So you have the hypothalamus, you have the neocortex, you have the thalamus. All of them are going to be activated. Hypothalamus is going to release the CRH, corticotropin releasing hormone via the circadian cycle. It's going to also control the core temperature. The sleep and wake cycle are going to be controlled by the neocortex. So you have all this. Now, in case now of bright light and non-bright light, in case of bright light, you see the retina is also going to activate the suprachiasmatic nucleus for the activation of this different part of the brain. And in case of night, you see that the melatonin is going to inhibit the suprachiasmatic nucleus, and this is not going to be activated in case of sleep cycle. Now, you see that there are two main parts which are involved in the circadian rhythm. You have the genetic feed factor of the suprachiasmatic nucleus, and we also have light and night. So these are the two main parts which are involved now in the control of the sleeps and the circadian cycle of the body, organ clock of the body. Now, if you remove this other part here, and you are not involved again with dark and sunlight, so the circadian cycle normally is as such. So you see that at 6 a.m. you are inactive, and at 6 p.m. your activity reduces. At 12 a.m. the activity is completely reduced to 6 a.m. So you see that normally this is the circadian cycle of the body. So you are active by 6 to 12, 12 to 6 p.m. and 6 p.m. to 12 a.m. But at 12 a.m. to 6 a.m. now you are hypoactive and you are sleeping. So that's the normal circadian cycle when you have sunlight and night. In case you don't have now sunlight and light and night, you are going to have this new circadian cycle with the shift as such. So at 6 a.m. you are going to have the shift as such. So you realize that there is a shift as shown here. So when you remove the sunlight and the night in the circadian rhythm, you realize that there is a shift. There is a small shift for every time that is going to occur. So as such. So now you have the storage system in the brain. So storage system in the brain, you have sense organ. As you've seen that it was 10 raised to the power 9 beats per second that you have, As you have 10 raised to the power 9 bit per second, you have forgotten due to fading. So you have so it's going to be stored first in the sensory memory. In the sensory memory, it's going to be stored for less than 1 second. When you have verbalization and unverbalization, as I'm verbalizing this tutorial, I am going to have 20 bits which is going to be stored, 20 bits per second which are going to be stored into my memory. So you have the primary memory here. So you have also here the unverbalized method is going to pass through the intermediate memory, and when you unverbalize it for many times, you are going to enter now into a secondary memory which is going to stay for minutes and years. So you also have the primary memory here, which only have 7 bits, and the more you verbalize and the more you store, it's going to pass now to a secondary memory here. So you also have a frequent repetition of the second memory, which is going to pass to tertiary memory, which remains for the lifetime story. So you have like 1 plus 1. If it asks you 1 plus 1, 1 plus 2, 1 plus 3, all of this is going to be recovered. Now you realize again here that the primary memory and the tertiary memory, all of them are fast to recover, but the secondary memory is difficult to recover when it stays for minutes to years. So this is why I usually like that everybody want to go for an exam should read the exam, even if they have already read and they know what is on the exam paper, they should read again the notions of the exams in order for it to be stored again back into the primary memory. Because you see from here that the primary memory is fast to recover, the second memory is slow to recover, and the tertiary memory is fast to recover. So if you read something and you know it, you can easily know something, but when it is stored in the secondary memory, it is slow to recover. In an exam period, you don't have enough time for you to recover to recover all the information. So it is very necessary for you to verbalize back the information and place it back into the primary memory for it to have a fast recovery. So now you need to know that the primary memory is just like the RAM of the body or of the computer, and the secondary memory and the tertiary memory are just like the secondary memory and tertiary memory are just like the the disk of the body. So this disk can be a disk of 1 terabyte, while this disk can be just a disk of 2 gigabyte, which is very slow to recover. So now you need to know that when you want to recover information, you must first pass back into a processor with a computer. When you want to recover information from the secondary memory, it must first go into the RAM, then it go into the processor for it to be processed for you to have the output information. So what happened here is that I usually advise everybody before going to an exam to always revise the notion that was done in the session for the exams, for you to place back the information into a primary memory, such that when the equation is asked in the exam, you have a fast recovery of that information. Or you can still use the second, you can still frequently study that particular notion, which is very difficult for you to have it, because for you to enter into tertiary memory, you need to study it for even a period of 1 year. For it to enter a tertiary memory, like 1 plus 1 will not study for 1 day, not 2 days, but for study for all our lifetime. So even 15 or 16 years you have studied 1 plus 1 for you to be integrated now into the tertiary memory, for it to be a fast recovery. So this is a record time access. So now you have the glia cells, the glia function. The glia cells are the cells. We have the cells of the brain. We need to know that we have the macroglia. The macroglia cells are the cells which are the macrophages of the brain. So all of them are used to remove the different particles, dead particles and bacteria which are found in the brain. The astrocytes are cells which are used to nourish the neurons. The neurons cannot nourish by themselves. They are very large and very occupied in their activity. So the astrocytes are used in their nourishment. The next cells are the ependymal cells. The ependymal cells are the cells which are used in the formation of the cerebrospinal fluid. So we have the ependymal cells which remove we have their fibers which goes now to the capillary, remove some constituent, and then for the production of the cerebrospinal fluid. So here is the myelin sheath, cells of the myelin sheath. When you see myelin sheath, then you see that you must know that there is the white matter of the brain which is going to be found. Here is going to be oligodendrocyte. Oligodendrocyte are just like the cells. You have oligodendrocyte and you have the myelin cells. So the Schwann cells are cells which are myelinating only one neuron at a time, and they are mostly myelinating out of the central nervous system. The Schwann cells are myelinating one neuron and they are myelinating out of the central nervous system, while the oligodendrocyte are myelinating many neurons and they are found inside the central nervous system. So you have the glial function. Here you have excitation. When we have excitation here, so this is what happened. So glial function, you have excitation, glutamine is released. So all this is a system which is used in order for you to have excitation of the neurons via the astrocyte. So what happens is that upon excitation, the glutamine is going to be released here. The glutamine passes into the astrocyte. The astrocyte are going to produce this. So you have glutamine. Glutamine is going to pass into astrocyte. Astrocyte are going to produce this from glutamine NH. So now, since this from glutamine is a protein, it's going to come back into the nerve. So when a particular nerve transmits, you see that when the impulse are transmitted from nerves, you know that impulse are transmitted from nerve via glutamine. So some nerves are glutaminergic neurons. So glutaminergic neurons are going to transmit impulses here. As they transmit impulses here, you realize that it's going to pass into this and going to stimulate the other neuron here. Now as the impulse is passed, you see that the neurotransmitter, which is going to be glutamine, is going to be uptaken via the astrocytes. The astrocytes are going to uptake that neurotransmitter and reprocess it, because this neurotransmitter glutamine cannot enter into this neuron. So they are going to reprocess it and going to convert into this glutamine NH2. So as it's going to be converted here, it's going to repass. The astrocytes are going to send back into the first neuron that has excited the latter neuron, then for the production of much more glutamine. As such, you also have potassium. Potassium can flow here into astrocyte for different distributions. So you have this, and astrocyte move the different part with the pedicels. So now you have the gaucheti. Now you are going to visualize other specific sensory neurons. So we have the gaucheti pathway. You need to know that the gaucheti pathway, anterior to the of the tongue, come from via the chorda tympani, where the posterior to the come from via the posterior to the comes via the glossopharyngeal nerve, while at the level of the palate and the pharynx, it comes via the vagus nerve, which is the 10th nerve. All of them are going to have their different nuclei. This nuclei here is going to be the geniculate. This ganglion is going to be the geniculate ganglion. This ganglion here is the inferior, and we have the inferior and superior glossopharyngeal ganglion. Here we have the inferior and superior vagal ganglion. All of them are going to enter at the level of the solitary tract. The solitary tract is found at the level of the medulla. And the medulla, they are going to move. So the portion which is used for the analysis or the interpretation of the different tastes are going to be located here. So part is going to move via the limbic system. You know that when you eat some food, you can remember about your mother, you can remember about your wife, a friend, and all that. All these emotions which are produced when you taste a certain food or a certain substance are going to and make you remember all these with specific emotions that are going to be stored in the limbic system. Now we have the next part here, the hypothalamus. You have the hypothalamus going to send also another impulse to hypothalamus and another impulse to the thalamus. The hypothalamus is going to send impulse like the test. All of this is going to send impulse to hypothalamus in order to tell you that the person is no more tasty and all that. The next one, you have the thalamus that's going to send, and the last one, which is used for the interpretation of the taste, is going to be via the insula. The insula is found at the deeper portion of the operculum that is formed by the parietal lobe and the frontal lobe of the brain. So here we have the postcentral gyro and we have the insula. The insula now have the different fiber which are used for the different tastes of the evaluation of the different main taste. And the main tastes that can be evaluated are the bitter, the sour, sweet, and salty taste. All these are evaluated in this insula here. the bitter, the sour, and the salty taste. Now in this graph here with the bitter, sour, and the salty taste, we see now the relative concentration with the pleasant and unpleasant sensation. So you see that when the bitter is concentrated, it's slightly concentrated a bit, it increases, but as it is much more concentrated, bitter, it can easily diminish, and it is no more it is highly unpleasant. Salt sensation, when salt sensation is high, it can be pleasant, but when it becomes too high, the pleasant sensation diminish excessively. The sour sensation, when it can be pleasant when it's high, but when it becomes too high, it also becomes too unpleasant. And lastly, the sweet sensation, when it becomes so high, it does not really become too unpleasant as the other ones. So you have the taste bud. Now the taste bud are the main sense organ which are involved in the sensation of this taste. So with the taste bud consists of the gustatory cells, which are the main cells involved in taste stimulation, and we also have the different synapses here with the supporting cells here. We have the supporting cells. These are the nerve fibers. The gustatory cells are the cells which are going to produce the generator potential, the sensory potential, and you also have the nerve fibers which are going to produce the action potential here. The other cells which are located at these other parts here are going to be the supporting cells, which are going to use for the feeding of the gustatory cells, and the nerve fibers are located proximally. So now we need to visualize the other pathway, which is the olfactory pathway. The olfactory pathway, you need to know that there's air here. Air is going to enter now into the nose, the nasal cavity. Here you have the olfactory region with the olfactory epithelium. So the olfactory epithelium consists of all this. So you have the cilia here, you have the mucus here at the level of olfactory epithelium. So all these are going to connect now to olfactory sensory cells. Olfactory sensory cells are these cells here. And now specific olfactory sensory cells are having a specific glomerulus. Specific olfactory sensory cells have specific glomerulus. This one in orange have a specific glomerulus for the sensation of one odor. This one has the specific glomerulus for the sensation of another odor. So now when all of these have this sensation, they are going to send fibers via these cells here and these other cells here. These cells are the bristle cells, or they can also be called the tufted cells, and these other cells here are the mitral cells. They are also going to send other cells here called the periglomerular cells, which are going to be inhibitory to the mitral and the tufted cells. So they are going to be inhibitory to the mitral and tufted, or the mitral cells, the bristle cells. So all this inhibition is going to cause such that it's the stimulation of the particular nasal sensation, let's say pungent sensation, should not be excessively high. So it's going to inhibit at time, and this inhibition can also be used in case of adaptation of the smell sensation. So it goes up, then you have all this. So these other fibers here can also come via the other upper motor neuron tracts. So in order to stimulate this and cause inhibition of these fibers, in order to prevent the excessive stimulation of those fibers. So now from here you can see the adaptation. We see that between the taste and the smell is less adaptative than the taste. If you have a same taste every time, you're not going to feel that taste if you have taken that taste, if you have eaten with that particular taste for a long period of time. So you see here that the adaptation of the smell is less compared to the adaptation of the taste. So now transduction of the olfactory stimuli. So if you have a certain odorant, it's going to enter into the receptor on the olfactory sensor cells. And it's going to enter into the receptor olfactory sensor cells. The receptor odorant complex is going to cause this the GP is going to cause the GPase. So you have the GP is going to cause the GPase activation. So the GPase activation is going to convert GTP to DDP. So this is a G protein, and this is going to cause the adenylate cyclase. So you have the GPase activation and you have the adenylate cyclase activation. So adenylate cyclase activation is going to cause ATP to CMP, and CMP is going to bind to the cation channel receptor, which is going to allow the sodium and calcium ion to enter into the cells for the activation of the gustatory cells. Now, this is the equilibrium organ, the vestibular organ. So you have all these. So you have the semicircular canals here. So after the semicircular canals, at this portion here, you have the utricles. So the utricles are the portions. You have the utricles here. Here you have the ampulla. So here you have the sacros. So now you need to know that the ampulla has a particular organ for itself, and this organ now is called the crista ampullaris, and the macula has also the utricles have particular utricle and sacros have particular organs for themselves called the macula. So here is the ampulla and here is the macula. So the ampulla and the macula, all of them have similar structure, design as such. So when you have a movement of fluid in this direction, it's going to cause an inhibition, and when you have movement of fluid in this direction, it's going to cause a stimulation. So example, so if you move the head of this person in this direction here, so it is going to be the ipsilateral. So it is going to be the ipsilateral sense organ which is going to be activated. So if I move in this direction, it is going to be this ear here which is going to be affected, and if I move the head in this direction, it's going to be this ear which is going to be affected. So in this case, you see that you are moving in this direction, so it is this ear which is affected. So you move toward this direction, the ipsilateral direction. So if I move here, you see that this ear is going to be affected. Now, as it's going to be affected, it's going to have these different fibers. These are the hair cells which are located at the level of the ear, the internal ear of the macula and the ampulla. So all these are going to send the fibers now to the vestibular nuclei. The vestibular nuclei can reflexly send for a postural analysis, or they can also send fibers here to the you have the vestibular nuclei sending fibers again to the cerebellum. They are not going to send fibers to the primary motor cortex. They are going to or not to the primary somatic sensation. They are going to send fibers to the cerebellum, and they are going to enter via the archiocerebellum or the flocconodular lobe. So as they enter now in the so the impulses via the vestibular organ, as you have seen above here, they are going to enter into the archiocerebellum. So the archiocerebellum, they are going to now control the posture, and they are going to move out now from the fascial nucleus to down the different part of the body for the control of the posture. Also, the impulse will come from the vestibular nuclei via the vestibular part of the vestibulocochlear nerve. They are going to come here, and they are going to articulate they are going to not articulate but stimulate the superior and the inferior colliculus of the midbrain. The superior colliculus of the midbrain has a connection with the oculomotor nerve, which is going to control the eye movement. So if somebody have a postural imbalance and have problem with the balance sensation, you are going to visualize nystagmus and some certain type of rotations and no control of the eye. So this is also another form to visualize vestibular impairment. So now let's visualize the eye. So the eye. So when visualizing the eye, you realize the following. So you have the lens at this side here, you have the aqueous humor, you have the cornea, you have the iris, and all these different sections. So the lens here, you have the aqueous humor. You know that anteriorly here you are going to have aqueous humor. Here you are going to have the vitreous humor. Here is the anterior chamber. Here is the posterior chamber. Here is the cornea. Here is the iris. Here is the retina. Here you have the second part here. You have the chorea. Here you have the sclera. You need to know that the sclera is the connective tissue which is posterior, and anteriorly you are going to have the cornea. Now you need to know again that in the middle layer you have the choroid posteriorly, and then anteriorly you are going to have the ciliary body. The ciliary body can be connected both to the lens and to the iris. Now on the lens you are going to have zonular fibers here which are going to connect. So these are all the structures, the different structures which are involved with the eye. Now, with the tear drainage, you need to know that the lacrimal gland is going to be located laterally, but the lacrimal side is located medially, with the lacrimal puncta with the lacrimal canaliculi. So when you have lacrimal tears which are produced, you are going to first enter into the lacrimal sacs, then are going to be drained both into the lacrimal canal lacrinae and also into the nasolacrimal duct, which is going to enter into the nose. This is why when you cry sometimes you are going to have some tears which are flowing out from the nose. Now these are all the sections. Now how does the inflow and drainage from aqueous humor? So the aqueous humor is produced by, there's a certain junction at this portion here, the Schlemm canal. The Schlemm canal is the one which is used to remove the fluids from the aqueous humor, and at this portion of the cerebral body there's a production in the posterior chamber, there's a production of the aqueous humor which is going to flow here, and at the level of the Schlemm canal there's going to be the removal of the fluid from the aqueous humor. So here's the anterior chamber, and here's going to be the posterior chamber with the zolina fibers from the cerebral body here. Now if you have somebody, this is now accommodation. Now the reflex of accommodation states that when you have near points, when you have objects which are near, what happens is that the body is always trying to the eye is always trying to make sure that it is going to, the light ray should always enter the level of the fovea centralis for you to have a very precise and very good resolution of the image you are seeing. So the near point, so what is going to happen is that when an object is going to be near, the lens is going to contract in order to make sure that it is going to, all the light rays are going to fall on the retina for you to have a very good view. And also when the object is going to be very far, the retina is going to be large, not going to contract. So you are going to have also the light rays on the retina. The question is, why is the retina now contracting? The point to note is that when light comes from an object which is very close, what happened is that when light comes from an object which is very close, what happened is that the light rays are divergent when it comes from an object which is very close. While an object which is very far, light rays are much more parallel. So for you to place parallel ray on the retina, the lens does not need to be very much contracted. While the near point, for you to place parallel rays, to place divergent rays on the retina, the lens needs to be highly constricted. This is why you are going to see, which is what I'm going to see in myopia and hypermetropia. Now let's see the sense organ of the retina. The sense organ of the retina are divided as such. We have the pigmented epithelium here, we have the outer segment photosensors, you have the outer layer granular, you have the inner, and you have the nerve fiber layer. So all these are the first portion, the pigmented epithelium. You're going to visualize the rod and cones. At this portion, the inner granular layers, you visualize the horizontal cells which are used now in the inhibition of the rods and cones. You need to know that the cones are the cells are connected to only one bipolar cell, and they are much more used in the function of resolution. They are used the resolution, and they are highly specific. While the rods are highly sensitive, and they visualize very high amount, a very small light intensity in darkness. So the rods are mostly used in darkness, while the cones are very highly specific, so they are used in bright light. The cones are divided now into the red cones, you have the blue cones, and the green cones, because they are the three main colors which can be identified by the eye. So now all of them are going to send their fiber into the bipolar cells, which are found in the inner layer of the granular cells or upon the histology section. So you have the horizontal cells here too. You have the amacrine cells, which are also other cells which are involved with the inhibition of the lateral inhibition of the cells, so that not too much impulse are sent. And last, you have the ganglion cells, which are going to take impulse on the bipolar cells to form the action potential. So all of these are going to produce this. So now this is the eye on the specific vision of the eye. Now you need to know some pathologies of the eye here. So in case of presbyopia, you know that the person is going to visualize well when the object is going to be distant here as such. Now the problem with presbyopia is that your cornea cannot constrict very well again. That is why when the rays come from divergent rays come from nearby object, you see that the person does not visualize very clearly because the image is produced behind the retina. So this is why you need to place a converging lens in order for you to converge the rays now onto the retina. Now, in case of myopia, the person has a very large eyeball. This is a genetic condition where the person has a very large eyeball with normal functioning cornea. So what happens is that the person when the person sees far object, cannot very well see far object. Far object will be as such. This is because when the rays come, it is diverging excessively, and this is going to be formed on the retina. This type of image. Why, when you have a correction, you see that you need a diverging lens, which is much more going to diverge, such that it's going to diverge again far above for the constriction of the lens to fall on the retina as such, and the image should be clear. In case you see that the person has exactly no problem when it comes to visualizing a close object, because close objects have diverging rays. So when you have this and you have this, all of them are going to be clear. Now, in case of hypermetropia, the person is going to see far away object because the rays are parallel, and their eyeball are very small. Since their eyeball are very small, when the rays are parallel, they are going to form on the retina. So now, in case when the rays are now diverging, in case of nearby object, you realize that the image is not going to, when the diverging capacity of the lens is not going to cause the image to fall directly on the small eyeball. So it's not going to fall on the retina. That's why the image is going to be formed posterior to the retina. So you need now a converging rays, unlike a diverging rays in case of myopia. You need a converging rays which is going to converge much more and cause that the image is formed on the retina. So here in this case, you have this image no more clear. You cannot see close to you, but far you can see. So now let's visualize now the specificity and sensitivity of the rods and cones. Now let's see the sensor density. So you see that here you have the photosensor distribution. The rods at the level of the macula, you have the macula densa. The macula densa is a portion of 1 millimeter with a point inside it called the fovea centralis, with a highly no rods found at the level called fovea centralis. So you see that when you are located at 0 degree, at let's say when you're located at negative 15 degrees here, you have no rods and cones. That's the optic disc. At the level of the optic disc here, 15 degrees. So you see that there is no rods and cones. You are going to have a blind spot. So if you visualize a very white paper, a very large white paper, at a certain portion, you're going to have, you see a dark zone. So that's the first thing. So at the 15 degrees here. Now, the fovea centralis, the fovea centralis is located at this position here at 5 degrees. So at 5 degrees, you are going to have the peak number of concentration of the cones. So the peak number of concentration of the cones are going to be located at fovea centralis. So now at 0 degrees here, you have the peak number of rods which are going to be found here. Now, the more you are moving laterally here and laterally here to 30 degrees, 60 degrees, and 90 degrees, you have more cones to 30 degrees, and all of them are descending. So you have more rods instead. The cones are not found except at the level of the fovea centralis and macula densa. So they are only found at their level of at this position, and the rods are found mostly at the level of the lateral portion, 30, 60, 90 degrees. So this is why in dark, you can easily visualize at the sides rather than visualizing in front of you. So that's what you have to see. Now, in case of visual acuity, you see that the sensitivity in darkness, this was photosensor distribution. This is how they are distributed. Now, you have sensitivity in darkness. You need to know that the sensitivity of the rods are much more higher than the cones. So the rods are highly sensitive than the cones. Why the cones are more specific in determining the different colors than the rods. Now, you have the photosensors. You need to know that the photosensor involved here, which we are going to much more visualize in biochemistry, are rhodopsin. And rhodopsin has two forms. So rhodopsin cytoplasmic, we have cytoplasmic outer segment, we have the disc segment, and we have the inner disc. So rhodopsin consists now of the 11 cis retinal and all trans retinal forms. So this is mainly what you are going to see. All these are going to visualize now in the biochemical section of the eye. So now here you are going to have some adaptation mechanism. You note, you visualize here that the rods can easily adapt while the cone cannot easily adapt. So this makes the retinal adaptation to be as such. So this is the adaptation. The rods cannot easily adapt while the cone the rods easily adapt while the cones does not easily adapt. So this makes the total adaptation of the eye to be as such. So from here we visualize all the different components of the neurophysiology, and we say thanks for your kind attention, and please don't forget to like and subscribe for science video makers. And there are some other sections that you can visualize again in the color atlas of physiology by your wish, like this other section involving the wavelength with the different color blindness that the person can have. You have the M cones, the L cones. The M cones are the cones which are involved with this color here. You have the L cones which involve the other colors and all that. So from here we say thanks for kind attention, and please don't forget to like and subscribe for science video makers. Thank you.